All right, welcome back to the Contrarians, everybody. We have a special episode today. We got Mike Lebrain from the Lebrain Train, formerly the Lebrain Train. Now Mike hosts a show called Grab a Stack. How you doing, Mike?
Good. How about you, Marco?
Good. Thanks for coming tonight. We have a fun episode tonight. We got showcase, so we got Mike in the hot seat today, and I'm going to ask Mike some questions, and we're going to get to know Mike a little bit better. You've probably seen him around, and today's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks a lot for joining us, Mike.
I just really appreciate any time I get to talk to you, Marco.
Absolutely. And I appreciate all the support as well. So thank you very much for that.
Vice versa, sir. Vice versa.
Awesome. All right. So when did you first get started into music? Like what age were you? What band was it? Was it a specific song?
Well,
what inspired you?
There's two steps to that story. Music, the answer would be 1977, John Williams, the Star Wars soundtrack, which my parents bought me on vinyl, and I had the original 2 LP set, which had a beautiful booklet in there, full color booklet. And I would leaf through that because, there was no VHS back then. So the only way to really relive the movies was through the music. And I was really into symphonic stuff up until Quiet Riot, Come On, Feel the Noise in 1983. And that kind of, well, even, there were other songs too, same time period. Mr. Roboto by Styx. So I started buying these other records. Styx was probably my first rock record. Quiet Riot, my first rock cassette. And then the big defining moment was December 26th of 1984, Boxing Day. My best friend Bob came over. How the friends used to get together after Christmas and play with their new gifts. I had a brand new Atari game, and Bob had a cassette called The Masters of Metal Volume 2. And there was a song on that cassette, among others, called Run to the Hills by Iron Maiden. And we played that song on repeat as we were plugging away at this Atari game. And it just felt like a magical moment where the music and the video game meshed in my inner soul. And I've never looked back. I was metal from that day forward. It was truly a life-defining moment.
That's incredible. What were some of your favorite bands at that time?
Wasp, Maiden, Kiss, little bit of Rat. Let me think, who else? Quiet Riot, still Van Halen, Ozzy, little bit of Sabbath, Priest. I just discovered a few new bands that were new to me. Anvil. there was so much out there at that time. It was a very rich time. There's a band called Mystique around that time too, but I wasn't there for it.
Yes, and thank you very much for holding up the DVD. That DVD, that's the DVD that I put out that Mike was holding up. That is available online on the Mystique store. So I appreciate that a lot, Mike. Thank you.
We do the Tim Derling thing and show the side. Actually, Marco, just thinking about doing this today, I was listening to the Mystique album in the car, and I put myself back in those shoes of where I was in like 84 and 85. And if like Mystique were a local band that I had access to in 84 and 85, I would have loved them. I can picture myself and my buddies banging our fists to Black Rider and standing on the firing line in our basement, So that's very much what I was into at the time, riffy, melodic, screamy, good solos. That's what I was into.
Well, and they did back then, a lot of bands like Mystique had to do covers too, and they played live in bars and things like this. And they played a lot of music that you probably would have loved to have seen a live band play at that time. Like they did Iron Maiden, but they did 2 Minutes to Midnight. They did like Electric Eye by Judas Priest. They did Perfect Strangers by Deep Purple. Ooh. They did even some more obscure songs, like they did TNT Seven Seas, I think. Oh. So they had a wide range of music that they did. They did their originals and they did a lot of covers that you probably would have loved to hear as well. But
I swear to God, Mystique would have been one of my favorite bands if things had been slightly different time-wise and age-wise and everything else.
Yeah. Absolutely. Very cool. I'm sure they'd love to hear that.
There you go.
What back then when you were collecting heavy metal, were you into like a new wave of British heavy metal? Was it hard to find metal records back then?
Yes and no. I was pretty much confined to the suburbs myself as far as my own stomping grounds go, how far I was able to navigate on a bike. So all we really had was a mall with a Zeller's store in it. Uptown, where I only got to on occasion, there was a Sam the Record Man, a Dr. Disc, and maybe just those two. Or then later on an independent store called Encore Records, which still exists today. The other two don't. So if I was willing to make a trip downtown, I could buy rare metal imports, 7-inch singles, 12-inch singles. But that was like a twice a year excursion for me most of the time. And believe me, there was plenty of stuff to buy at the mall, at the Zeller's store, because I was just starting a collection. And there was like 7 or 8 different Judas Priest cassettes there on the CBS label that I didn't have, you know. And then you flip through AC/DC and it's like, holy crap, there's like 10 AC/DCs that I don't have. So there was plenty for me to buy without having to go uptown. But when we did go uptown to those stores, we always made sure to buy something rare, you know, buy something you wouldn't see at the other stores. So that's where I found things like Judas Priest Rockarola on vinyl, which you just couldn't find at any mall store at the time, and Maiden 12-inch singles, stuff like that.
Very cool. Were you a vinyl or a cassette guy?
Both. Initially, I had a record player. Later on, got a cassette player, but it was both at the same time. I liked vinyl for the packaging, and I liked cassette for the convenience. You know, if my parents and sister and I were going up to the cottage for a weekend or a week, we'd bring cassettes. But I really missed, when I was up there at the cottage, I really missed leafing through my Iron Maiden Live After Death booklet, you know, with all the full color pictures and everything. It was an experience, that period, to have those vinyl records. It was an experience.
Now, I could be wrong, but it sounds like you weren't really close to like a big city. So like, did you get to see bands when they came through? Like, were there any big bands from that time that you got to see live?
Helix. That was it. Helix. There were probably other bands that rolled through town. Like I know Kiss rolled through town in the early 70s when I was just a kid.
Yeah, they got around everywhere, right?
Yeah. But basically my first concert was Helix, you know, the Hometown Boys. And we saw them at the Center in the Square, which is a local theater, and it's a beautiful theater to see music. I've seen a lot of bands there over the years. And we were seated up on the mezzanines. And wouldn't you know it, Brian Vollmer climbs the amp stacks up onto the mezzanines and runs right across the entire theater and then back down onto the stage again. And I was afraid to reach out. I was too shy to reach out and slap his hand. So I just did a, yeah, man, as he ran past. But that was definitely a memorable experience. That was the Wild in the Streets tour, 1987.
Nice.
My first concert. Yeah.
Very cool.
Actually, sorry, that was my first rock concert. For street cred, my actual first concert was Johnny Cash at the same venue in 1983. Yes.
Cool.
Johnny and June Carter Cash in 83, same venue.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Very
So there's
cool.
some street cred for you.
Awesome. Now, like, are you somebody who held on to your collection from when you were a kid, or did you lose stuff and you had to replace it later?
You know, after I've met fellows like Tim Derling, who is a serious collector and collects, you know, if he's got an album, he wants it on the 4 formats. I gave away and threw out 90% of my original cassette collection because I thought it was a period of time, Marco, where these things were valueless. You know, you'd find them for 10 cents. And I threw them all in the dumpster. And that includes a lot of ones that were hand recorded by me with my own custom artwork.
Nice.
I threw them all in the dumpster, and the rest of them I gave away to a girl. And I like to joke that right now they're in a Thunder Bay landfill. So I have very little of my original collection left, which really makes me sad because now I've met guys like Tim who have like, oh, here's Def Leppard Hysteria on cassette. This is my original copy. And I'm like, dope.
Have you gone back and replaced any of those cassettes, or?
No, I haven't. My collection is growing, but you know, in a different way. I'm trying to just, you know, acquire more of these now.
Was there anything that you like couldn't get rid of? Did you hold on to like one cassette that you're like, I'm not going to get rid of?
Yeah, actually, well, there a few. Yeah, things that to this day are still not available on CD or other formats. Yes, I did hang on to.
Very cool.
So I can give you a couple examples right off the top. Van Halen Right Now cassette single has a different version of Right Now on it with no guitar solo. So it's more of like the keyboards take the center stage during that section. I have a Helix Good to the Last Drop a cassette single with a B-side called SEX Rated, and it's a completely different recording from the version that ended up on an album later on. And I've emailed Brian Vollmer about it, and I've emailed Daryl Gray about it, and neither of them, they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Neither of them remember the track at all.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, so stuff like that to me is priceless. And I hung on to a few indie cassettes, bands like Slash Puppet. I believe we've talked about them before.
I've heard, I know of the band name for sure.
Early 90s band. They were on the same Raw Meat series as Slam Glory were. Awesome. And, you know, stuff like that. I've hung on to those cassettes. And actually, I even have a handful of them here. I've never replaced Wolfsbane.
Very cool,
on
man.
CD. So here's awesome. Wolfsbane.
Live fast and what? What did that say?
Live fast, die fast.
That's awesome.
That's how you got to do it.
Now I have to look up Wolfsbane.
Let me see here. A lot of these are ones that I recorded. Like this one here is a Kim Mitchell intimate and interactive from Much Music that I recorded onto a cassette.
Okay, so you put that label on it.
I did, yeah.
Very cool.
But yeah, I tried to hang on to stuff like that simply doesn't exist in a digital format or in a vinyl format.
Right. And as a collector, do you have a holy grail that you're searching for, or do you have a holy grail that you own?
Many holy grails that I own, and many, many more that I'm searching for. I'm going to throw one out right now. Iron Maiden, Best of the Beast on vinyl, the 6-record set. It has a live version of Revelations that isn't on the compact disc version. That's like $300 at least, a minimum in decent condition. So that's one that I want. One that I have, I'll just grab it. This is a nice one. Dream Theater, Images and Words, the book, but it comes with a CD. And on that CD is an exclusive, one exclusive live Dream Theater track. And now it's escaping me which one it is, but there's an exclusive Dream Theater track within this book set. And that's definitely not going anywhere. That's staying here safe and sound forever. There's a Pearl Jam 10 box set back there with the Mama Son demo on it. There's a Tim Derling book. I think probably the most interesting and expensive Holy Grail that I have in price to weight ratio is the Marillion double live album called Marillion Rochester, which came out in, I believe, 1998. And it was a gift that was given away to those who helped fund Marillion's tour, their 1997 tour. And the CD was autographed and given to them as a gift. That's the only way you could get it.
Wow.
Unless you paid $300 on eBay, which I did. So that one was a holy grail to happily scratch off the list, but also quite painfully.
Well, sometimes you got to bite the bullet, right? And I know you see, it sounds like you have the curse like I do. And sometimes when you're a completionist, like, you know,
I have had times, Marco, and you may have had times like this as well, where I'm having a perfectly normal conversation with a fellow, and I find out that I'm missing a single or a track, and it's like I'm on Discogs immediately and ordering a copy. That actually happened recently with Harrison Kopp, my co-host on Grab a Stack of Rock, who alerted me to the existence of an Alice Cooper song called The Sharpest Pain that is only on this Dirty Diamonds pre-release promo CD. It's a freaking great song, Marco. I think Harrison might have put it as like his #1 Alice Cooper deep cut. If I'm not mistaken, Harrison, he's going to kick my butt if I got that fact wrong. But as soon as he told me about it, I was on Discogs and bought this, which ended up coming with this Rough Mixes bonus disc. Yeah. Very and that's cool. Kind of what Grab a Stack of Rock really is. I just grab stuff and show it to people.
So it sounds like, you know, in that late 80s period, you were kind of into like a lot of those like metal bands, probably even some of the ones that skewed even like hair metal-ish. And you just mentioned Pearl Jam. What was it like living through that early 90s era when a lot of your favorite bands started disappearing and all these like new alternative bands started coming in? What was that like?
It was
you
tough.
Experienced that? It
was tough, Marco, because rock and roll, the way that I had known it, was riding a high in 1991. We had so many great #1 records. We had the Metallica Black Album went to #1. Van Halen for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, Skid Row, Slave to the Grind. And of course, at the end of the summer, early fall, Guns N' Roses with the double Use Your Illusions. You know, it seemed like rock and roll had never been more popular. And I was kind of digging the way that it was going. Bands like Van Halen were heavying up a bit. Guns N' Roses kind of blew up their sound. Metallica did what they did, but it was more accessible to me. And it just seemed like rock and roll was going into like a heavier, more experimental direction. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I'm seeing this guy on my TV wearing a sweater, a ratty old sweater and unwashed hair. And I'm like, yeah, okay, it's a good song. I like it, different. And I certainly didn't expect it to blow up the way it did. And then next thing you know, it's Pearl Jam. And Soundgarden were already on my radar, but they really leaped ahead at that time. And I felt completely left behind. I didn't know what to do. All my favorite bands were coming out with good albums, you know? Kiss Revenge, 1992. Poison, Native Tongue, 1993. These were albums that I still feel quite fondly for. And they were just nothing compared to the current wave. And I felt completely left behind. And finally, in like late 93, I finally cut my hair and started wearing a pair of boots with with shorts, and bought an Alice in Chains. I bought Dirt as my first grunge purchase, and I reluctantly joined the movement, but it was kicking and screaming, believe me.
Wow. Well, you even mentioned Meat earlier, so you're an avid, from our conversations, you're an avid collector and reader of Meat magazine. All of a
Yes.
sudden, that's going away, and all the bands that they were pushing were going away. So it's like the whole
Right,
music
like,
landscape must have changed. Must have
yeah,
been.
like Drew Masters even changed the acronym for Meat to mean metal alternative, and I was just like, oh my god. And it felt like I was really, what I liked was getting harder and harder and harder and harder to access. And I started working at my record store in 94, and you know, the stuff that I liked, Dio and whatnot, nobody was buying it, man. Nobody was buying it. It was sad.
Everyone, when you worked at the record store, if somebody came in every once in a while and bought like a Dio album, we were like, hey.
Be like, yeah, I'd be like, yeah, man, Dio. And you know, you'd make a connection there. And you know, a lot of some of those guys that I met at the record store are still my friends today on Facebook, you know.
Cool.
Yeah.
What's something that you're very contrarian on?
It's a good question. Very contrarian. Okay. Well, this is something that you and I have talked about before. Black Sabbath Born Again. That, confession time, that's my favorite album by anybody of all time. And when I say that, some people go, oh, yeah, bold move. And other people are like, this guy's high. But, you know, it has a lot to do with context. And that was one of the first metal albums that I grew up with. And I'm an Ian Gillan fan, huge Ian Gillan fan. And I love combinations of bands. So like when Poison got together with Richie Kotzen, I was like, yeah, man, that's gravy. Any of these weird combinations, when Robbo Robertson joined Motorhead, I was like, this is my thing. And so with Born Again, when the Deep Purple and Black Sabbath worlds collided, it was my thing. And it's like mixing your chocolate with your peanut butter. That's what Born Again is to me, folks. That's my Reese's peanut butter cup.
I agree with you. Like it's an incredible album, and they happen to like Black Sabbath was always like a heavy metal band, and they were I know early on they tried to be like, let's be the horror movie band where we'll do, instead of horror movies, we'll do horror music kind of thing. But like that album in particular, it just has like, I don't know if it's the production or what, but it has this creepy kind of atmosphere that doesn't sound like any of the other Black Sabbath albums. And even Ian Gillan as the addition, he's almost like a banshee on that album. Like he,
Yeah.
and I think, and I said this on our show once, that I think that was his voice after that album. I think his voice, and you'll hear it, and I hear it in Perfect Strangers, which was like the year after.
Yep.
I feel like that's when his voice kind of comes to, like he peaked. All the albums before that, his voice were like 10 out of 10. And then I think he's kind of started coming down after that album a little bit. Maybe not completely, but I think that's kind of where it started to come down a bit, because he kills it on Perfect Strangers too. But I just feel like you hear it age in between that year. And I think that was a tough tour for him.
Well, he really sounds like he struggled on some of the bootlegs I have. And it definitely sounds, I can't remember which show I have, but it definitely sounds like he's blown his voice out on some songs. Like he just can't can't stay on one note. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that tour did a lot of damage. And he was doing heavy drugs at that time too. Oh geez. Anyway. Well,
But
no,
yeah,
that's not 100% true. Sabbath were doing the heavy drugs, and I think Gillan was just drinking.
he was a big drinker.
Yeah.
What's something we don't know about you?
It's a good question. I'm a pretty open book. On my site, MikeLadano.com, for those who are curious, I write about everything, every aspect of my life. So something that people don't know. Huh. Let's come back to this. Let's circle back. I'll have to think of that.
You brought up your site. That's something I want to ask you about, because
Sure.
I'm not sure the origin of that, and I'm not sure exactly the history of it either. But you've had a website and you've had a blog and you've reviewed music for like quite a few years. Like, how did that all start, and where did that go, and what's going on with that today?
Well, I've been writing reviews since I was a young fellow, and most of that stuff's all lost now. But when Amazon came along, I would just, hey, here's an outlet for me to write reviews. Then around 2012, I was doing a lot of radio, and it started out as me being a contest winner, but then I started winning like every day. So eventually they had me actually come into the station for an entire week, and people tried to stump me on rock trivia. And don't try it today, because I'm not as sharp as I was back then 10 years ago. But the guy at the station was like, listen, man, you really need to do something with your music and your musical knowledge. And he sent me a link one day, and I clicked it, and it was a WordPress link. So I started my website on like March 6th or something like that of 2012. I started posting my Amazon reviews, and it took off from there. And I did that for a good solid 10 years. And I'm kind of tired of the reviewing now, so I've kind of shifted gears a little bit. I'm still talking about music a little bit, but I'm also just talking about my own life and things that make me laugh, and toys and games as well, because that's part of my life. There's a whole bunch of action figures behind me there. There's some Eddies, but there's also an Incredible Hulk and some Stormtroopers. It's all a part of my life. And to me, it all, there's always a musical connection somewhere, because to me, those things there, those action figures, that's part of that symphonic history that I come from, that John Williams stuff that I still love to this day. And I'm always listening to music, no matter what I'm doing or thinking. So to me, there's always a music connection with everything I do. But I've decided to put the brakes on the reviews for now, because quite frankly, I'm exhausted.
Wow. How many reviews do you think you've written?
Thousands. I can't remember how many. 3,000, maybe? I can't remember.
And most of them are on your site, or some of them are lost, you said?
There's a few Amazon ones that aren't really worth reposting, and the ones that I wrote, on paper back when I was a kid for a fanzine that I was one day going to publish, those are all in the recycling bin, I guess. But not, I would say 99% of what I've written is up on the site, and some of it's pretty good, some of it's not, but a lot of it I've spent hours and hours and hours and hours working on, and trying to be as complete. And I just wanted to, I've been very inspired over the years by two guys, Martin Popoff and Drew Masters. I've always admired both guys for their writing and everything they've done. And Martin, really, he's like the fact guy. He knows everything. And I strove to kind of touch upon every obscure fact that was relevant to an album in an album review. And I got the 5 out of 5 star format from Drew Masters when he used to have the 5 out of 5 M's. So, those two guys kind of shaped me in terms of style.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What makes collecting physical things special?
Oh man, I don't know. It's a disease. It's a disease. But I think part of it is it can never be taken away from you. So, you've got a hard drive here, and my entire music collection is also on this hard drive right here. But if I drop this hard drive, I'm very diligent about backing up, but you know what I mean? Like, there's always something that can go wrong, but that is there. That, short of a natural disaster, knock wood, that is there. It's for keeps. And I like looking at the packaging when I'm listening to the music. I used to be the kind of kid that would sit on his bed and leaf through the cassette J card and read the lyrics and the credits. And, I've always liked how certain bands buried jokes in their credits, like Twisted Sister and Iron Maiden. and I just became addicted to that.
Last one before we get into like the fun like this or that questions.
Okay.
Do you think you'll ever stop collecting? And is there an end goal?
No, man. You're actually asking these very deep existential questions. Okay, so I guess the theoretical answer is there'll never be an end goal, but I would like to have complete collections in terms of every track by the bands that I love the most. So, your Kiss, your Priest, your Maiden, your Sabbath, your Purple. I would like to have every version of every track physically by those bands. So it's a never-ending quest because those bands are still releasing music, most of them anyway. And what was the other part?
I said, what's the end goal, and do you think you'll ever stop?
Space is the constraining factor, but I hope I never stop. I hope that I can continue to expand. Space may become a confining factor in the future, though. We'll see.
All right, so I have some this or that questions for you. So you can give me a quick answer if you want, or you can explain your answer. It's up to you.
Okay, let's do it. Yeah.
Okay, Maiden or Priest?
Maiden. Hard to explain why. I think they're just an inch closer to my heart.
DC or Marvel?
Marvel. I've never been a DC fan. My dad raised me, although he doesn't remember doing this, he raised me on Marvel comics by buying them for me at the convenience store. He doesn't remember this, but I assure him it's true.
Favorite Kissology?
3.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
I like the non-makeup.
That's contrarian.
Is it? I don't know. Like, there's good stuff on all of them. I love Eric Singer, man. Love Eric Carr, love Eric Singer. 3.
That early 90s period, early 90s to mid 90s, like right up to the reunion tour, that's a bit of an underrated era. Like, I find if you look at their live set lists from that show,
I know.
They were doing some like obscure songs and hits, and they had a long set list, and they were playing well. Like that 93, 94, 95, you look up those shows, like on there, a lot of them on YouTube. They're some great shows.
I have a 2 CD bootleg from Buenos Aires that's quite good. I love Bruce Kulick. Yep, 94. I love Bruce Kulick, and they were Pissed Off and Raw, and Paul was singing great. Oh man, Paul was singing great back then.
Yeah, and they kind of had nothing to lose, where they had the guts to play songs but they had the guts to play songs that they wouldn't play live now. They were reaching and doing some cool stuff live, and the acoustic. They were doing all the acoustic stuff around that time too.
That's true too. I have a Live in Australia from '95 from that acoustic tour.
Yeah, that's a very interesting era. So yeah, I it's a little bit contrarian. Most people say 2. My favorite's the first one. But a lot of people will say their second volume, but that's a bit contrarian to say the third one for sure.
Okay.
But I don't blame you, because that's a great era.
Absolutely. I've been contrarian twice. I'm proud of myself.
Okay, here's one. Skid Row or Badlands?
I think I'm going to go Skid Row. They have more albums to choose from, so they have an advantage there. I like Sebastian Bach vintage voice, and I really, really love, this is quite contrarian as well, I really love the Subhuman Race and Thick Skin albums. Really, and Thick Skin I realize doesn't even have Sebastian, but I love those 2 albums. We were talking earlier about the 90s. A lot of bands had to adapt into the 90s, and Skid Row did it with Thick Skin in 95. No, not Thick Skin, Subhuman Race in 95. And I liked what came out of them. They're working with Bob Rock, and it was heavy, and it was, I liked it. I liked what a lot of bands did when they were forced to adapt in the 90s. Badlands, I love that debut, but I've never gotten into the second album quite as much as the debut, and I've never even heard the third album.
Dio and Rainbow or Dio and Sabbath?
Sabbath, because Sabbath is my band. I turned into a Sabbath freak around 1991-ish. When I got the Tear album with Tony Martin, I turned into a Sabbath freak, and I'd started seriously collecting Sabbath around then, and they've always just been, again, an inch closer to my heart,
Absolutely.
No.
Original series or Next Generation?
Original series, because that's what I grew up with, and that's what I have so many memories of watching Star Trek in the basement with my dad. But TNG, man, they had some really good episodes. Best of Both Worlds. I love Picard. I just love Picard. I've got a Picard action figure back there that I'm going to be showing off on my show on Friday. But still I got to go original series because Spock, Leonard Nimoy, end of story.
Hit parader or circus?
Okay, so I was a hit parader freak growing up. I had every issue from a certain period of time. And then I read an interview with Sebastian Bach. Do you remember the bottle incident where he threw a bottle into the audience and hit a girl in the face?
Yes, I heard about that. I do know that.
So he had his day in court, and I guess the prosecuting lawyer had a Hit Parader magazine that had a fabricated Sebastian Bach interview that was completely fabricated by Andee Setcher of Hit Parader magazine, and they used it as evidence against him in court.
I didn't know that. Wow.
And I guess Bach phoned up Andee Setcher. He's like, I never fucking said. Oh, did it? I swear. Sorry. Anyway.
No, that's okay. You can swear.
That's what I remember reading in my rock magazines, and I decided at that point to stop buying Hit Parader magazine. I made a point of stopping. So circus.
I didn't know. I never knew that.
That's according to Bach. And it might have come from Meat Mag. That might have been in a Meat magazine interview. It was obviously not in Hit Parader. It was obviously in another magazine. It might have been Meat. I can't remember.
Interesting. Very cool. I did not know that.
There you go.
Are you complete in the box guy or take it out and play with a guy?
Both. I like to take it out and play with it, but there's certain things that I will keep in the box. I won't really open up anything that I buy that's vintage in the box. That would be foolhardy to me. But I have I have Eddie here still in the package. I have a complete set of the Maiden figures packaged.
Cool. That's sick.
Yeah. Awesome. And I want to keep them that way because I mean, look, you don't want to separate that card art from the figure, do you? I don't think so.
No.
So I like to play with them.
Oh,
but
blame me for that.
That's okay. I like to play with them, but I like to display them as well.
Awesome, very cool, Mike. It was awesome getting to know you better. It's awesome to ask you some questions. And
thank you, sir.
I never knew about that trivia thing on the radio. I'm sure you've talked about it on your show, but I haven't seen every single episode that you've done. So that's a really cool history that I did not know about. I learned something about Sebastian Bach. Can you tell us about Grab a Stack and what that is and what you're doing now?
Well, we just started literally in October. I used to host, as you know, we mentioned at the start of the show, I had the Lebrain train for 2.5 years. I did this from March of 2020 to July of 2022. And you were actually on the very last show that I did of the Lebrain train.
Thank you.
And kind of like what I was saying earlier about the reviews, I got tired because we and me in particular, we put in 110% into every episode, making lists and doing our research. And I got tired. And I think we went out on a really high note with that Mystique episode. People loved that Mystique episode that we did. Martin came on. But then I started getting the itch again and more just in a social fashion. And I messaged Harrison, my co-host, one morning, and I said, Harrison, what would you say about going live tonight for an hour and just shooting the shit? And he said, yeah, or in his Australian accent, yeah, mate, I would love to do that. And that's how it began. We didn't have a name for the show. Uncle Meat kind of suggested a long time ago that if I wanted to go live again, why don't I just grab a stack of CDs that I have sitting next to me and go through them and show them to the audience, and maybe that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
And it was a great idea, and that's basically what we've done. And you've been on twice, and Tim's been on like 3 times, and I've got a kind of a great group of pals that are participating and showing off some pretty incredible treasures in some cases. And it's formal and fun, and it requires very little prep work on my part, which is what I wanted from the beginning. I wanted to have a social kind of fun discussion with my friends without having to put in homework like I used to. And we found a way to do it. So grab a stack of rock. That's what we do. And we've been doing it virtually every Friday night at 7 p.m. live. And I'm having a blast. I'm having an absolute blast doing it. And I'll be seeing Tim Derling this Friday when we do Star Trek. Actually, we're doing Star Trek collectibles. Cool. And I'll hopefully be seeing you again soon as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, Uncle Meat's a smart dude.
He is.
And but where did you meet Harrison? How did that connection happen?
He was a reader of mine, and he contacted me out of the blue maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Like, hey mate, I really like your Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden reviews, and I'm doing this terrible Australian accent. But we just over the years became pals. And when we started doing the live streaming and he was able to interact with guys like myself and meet face to face, he really enjoyed that. And that was actually during the pandemic when a lot of us were not able to socialize, which was sort of the impetus for the whole thing in the first place. And yeah, like he just became a good pal. And he's incredibly creative with the Lego, as you've seen. Like, the guy is a Lego artist. And I really enjoy working with him, and he makes me laugh in his dry Australian way.
That's very cool. And you have a great show, and I really
Thank
enjoyed being on. In fact, I thought it was quite exciting to think about, like, oh, I'm gonna get some stuff together, and I can't wait to show some stuff off, you know. And it was a lot of fun and easygoing and laid back, and you know
I
what I
think
mean?
one of
Like,
the best things we did was the Creatures of the Night episode just
that
before
was
Christmas.
awesome.
That was so good. It was so good.
I still have these I haven't put these away yet. I showed all these off on that episode of Grab a Stack, and I haven't put them away yet. So if you folks out there want to check out what I have to say about these and what these are, go check out Mike Lebrain's Grab a Stack on his channel. And yeah, absolutely, that was a lot of fun, and thank you for having me on. And anybody who's interested in collecting physical stuff, or interested in having a fun kind of like laid back, like chill kind of time, go check out Mike's channel. I'm going to post a link in the description. Give him a like and subscribe. Like, he's doing this stuff for free. He's been doing it for years. He knows his stuff. He's written all these reviews, and he has great guests on, and they have a lot of fun. And he's doing it for free. I'm sure he'd appreciate a like and subscribe. And we would too. And other than that, Mike, any last words?
Yeah, I just want to say one more time, thank you to yourself and to Tim for coming on board and having some fun with us. And everybody who's participated in the show so far via the comments or joining me live. We have a pretty good open door policy. So we had Grant Arthur was on a couple of weeks ago. And last week I had on an Instagram shoe model with 200,000 followers. So I mean, like, we do just about everything on our show. So come on down and have a good time and join us live, ask questions, and we love to answer them live.
Very cool. And I've got a feeling we'll be seeing Mike again real soon.
I hope so.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.